get started. And then we'll see who we have and go from there. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to our policy committee meeting for the citizens or the city council charter review ad hoc policy committee meeting. We have citizens meeting later this afternoon for May 2nd. We are going to be reviewing a couple of new items that we received from the police department and the fire department. And these will be the last items that we will be reviewing for the possibility of going to the ballot this year. We're not going to entertain any new items. We have a very strict timeline that the Citizens Charter Review Committee is going to need to be able to do their work and for us to be able to be done by the first study session in June. So if anybody else has any items, unfortunately, we are not going to be able to review them this year, or at least for the November ballot. So first, though, we do have approval of the minutes. I know we had some email corrections of the minutes. And then I had one minor correction, minor but meaningful correction on the citizen ideas for charter questions. It said allow felons, and the suggestion really was for us to not permit felons to run for office since last year. That's what the vote was. And this person felt strongly that we shouldn't. And so we have already reviewed like that's, that there's a specific set of felonies that would prevent someone from running for office per the state constitution, and that we've been legally advised that we must abide by that same set of convictions. So I just wanted to make sure it said not allow instead of allow on that bullet point for that item.
I'll make that change. Thank you.
Okay, yep, thank you. Any other changes?
Councilmember Coombs, last night I sent over, sorry, it was a late draft copy of significant changes from my section. So I hope that I won't approve the minutes until those are applied to the current revisions of the current packet or whatever we're doing here. So, but I made some significant revisions that I hope can be implemented into the current draft.
Yeah, and I support those. I did get that email. I support those. Councilmember Marcano, do you have any objection to those changes that Councilmember Lawson had requested via email?
Oh, ma'am, that's fine with me.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we can go ahead and definitely incorporate those changes, and those are what will get published within the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for making those, and I don't have any other changes. Councilmember Marcano, any other changes? Sorry, I keep stopping you from taking a bite of your lunch.
None from me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, excellent. So then those minutes will stand approved as modified by Councilmember Lawson in the copy that we all got via email. Okay, so that's the first order of business. The next order of business is the AFR lateral recruiting, and I don't see Deputy Chief Robnett here, so without objection, I will go ahead and do the APD changes first and then the AFR changes. Is there any objection to that? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and start with the APD changes. And we have with us today Chris Jewell from the police department to provide us with an update on those changes. I think you might have it posted or something over your camera, Chief Jewell.
It's not a posted. Actually, I just redid my computer and plugged my webcam back in, and it does not appear to be connecting yet. So I apologize. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. We
All
can't
right.
see you. but if that's
I-
okay with you, that's okay with us.
All right, my apologies. I'm not savvy enough technologically to fix this on the fly. So
No problem.
thank you, council
Thank you
members,
for
for
joining us.
entertaining these recommended changes we have. I'll just kind of go through and just touch on a summary of each one and the reason behind it. And then as we go, just if you have any questions, let me know. So in section one, number one, that one's just a clarification of who is a member of civil service and who is not. And commanders and above are not considered members of civil service, although if they end up getting rolled back, they would roll back to their last highest civil service rank. But the rank of commander, division chief, deputy chief are not civil service positions. Any questions on that one? Okay.
I don't have
Okay.
any, Councilmember Marcano and Councilmember Lawson, any questions?
I have no questions on that one.
That seems very straightforward to me.
All right,
Great.
thank you.
So, and then this next section in section 3, it basically just talks about if additional ranks or grades want to be created by council, it's 7 votes to carry that. So it's pretty straightforward. Moving on to 5. So one of the issues that we've had is that the charter had a designated number for a certain position, and this kind of corrects that just to correspond it to population growth. So that, in 10 years, and we've added, whatever 100,000 people, we don't have to come back and make another adjustment or amendment. So this just kind of helps the positions keep pace with population growth and the number of sworn officers that we have. So the first one is 0.5% of authorized sworn officers can be designated as division chiefs, and not more than 1.5% of authorized sworn officers can be appointed as commanders, is the nuts and bolts of that one. And then it just goes on to talk about the deputy chief position. Once we hit 800 authorized sworn, we could add a deputy chief, and then at 1,500 authorized sworn, we could add another deputy chief. So I think that's really the significant pieces of that one, unless anybody has any other questions with regard to that.
So I just have the question of kind of how you guys came up with those specific numbers. I totally understand having something that's a ratio and that's a formula rather than a set number. But how did those numbers for that ratio come about?
Yeah, so the 0.5, it just more or less keeps consistency with where we are right now. So it doesn't really change a whole lot of structure. And then the 1.5 is the remaining executive level. Basically, it's a combination of captains and commanders. So it just maintains that executive amount of people that we currently have, and then proportionally, it'll just maintain that. So and then on the deputy chief, just from a span of control standpoint, once you hit 800, having one deputy chief just becomes probably a little bit too much work. So yeah, that's the answer for that. I can get more detailed on that if you like, but that's 0.5 and the 1.5. That's where those came from.
Okay, no, excellent. I don't need any more information on that. I just wanted to understand kind of where those ratios were. So it's really just maintaining the current ratios rather than having a fixed number, at which point, as we
Right.
get bigger, you would fall out of that ratio.
Yeah, the 0.5 equates to 4 division chief positions, which is what we have right now with our authorized strength.
Okay, excellent. Are there questions from other members? Councilmember Lawson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Marcano?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Coombs. Chief Jewell, I do have a follow-up, kind of along the same lines of what Councilmember Coombs just asked. I know that typically when you are in a supervisory position, especially one where you have like a direct, kind of responsibility for mentorship and, skills development, training, etc., you typically don't want to have more than 5 direct reports. I think it's like the kind of like the common standard that I have been informed of. And I'm just wondering, with these ratios that you're proposing here, I guess what does that level, the number of direct reports currently look like within our organizational structure? And are we currently following what might be considered a best practice?
Sure. Yeah, so the span of control as you move up tends to shrink just a little bit. So, for instance, my position, I have 3 direct reports, and that's typical of a division chief. And then as we scale down, that does increase. Lieutenants typically may have 4 direct reports, but where that span of control does exceed your 1 to 5 would be sergeant to officer. It is not uncommon for us to have 6 or 7 potentially officers reporting to a singular sergeant once you get down to that more line level area. So yeah, I agree with you that, in my own personal experience for that matter is once you start getting beyond, I was kind of trying to stay like at 6-ish or so, that you really start to, you can struggle a little bit keeping up and making sure that you, to your point, mentoring, skill development, leadership training, all those things that are important. So we probably do go beyond that once you get down into the weeds a little bit at the line level, but as you move up, it's definitely more consistent with what you're talking about.
Okay. And this is really touching just those upper level positions. So to your earlier point, then this is just maintaining that ratio. So, all right.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then the 800 and 1500. So I know you kind of answered this already, but it's like when I see hard numbers, like just fixed numbers like that, I do feel like that's maybe a little arbitrary. And so I guess what's the real like math to justify the 8 and 15? Because honestly, I would have figured, well, it would have been 8 and 1600 then, to justify another one. So yeah, could you explain that in a little more detail for me, please?
Well, I can try. I might have to follow up with that, but it's, as I understand it, it's just a best practice with regard to an agency that size, how many people of that rank you would typically have in a leadership or an executive level. So it's modeled, and I can't name agencies off the top of my head, but as I understand in conversation, that just comes from a best practice once you get to that point. But yeah,
Okay.
I understand that when you have a number like that, it can, it can feel like a little bit of a swag. And I think, that there was some research done with regard to that, and that it seems like most agencies are right around those numbers.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Okay, any other section 5, any other questions I can answer for anybody?
No, I think we're good. Although actually, is that the same section where there's the conversation about the qualifications of chiefs? Yeah, so just we're requiring chiefs that come from outside the department, or rather deputy chiefs and division chiefs, to already be post-certified. So not become post-certified within a certain amount of time. I saw that strike.
So,
I just wanted to confirm.
yes, ma'am. Yeah. So on this one, this is does 2 things really. It talks about it clarifies language with regard to deputy chiefs and division chiefs that wasn't very clear previously, and what the chief's rights is empowered to bring in a deputy chief and or 1 or more division chiefs that had no previous employment with the city, right? So somebody from the outside. And so that clarifies that language. It already said that, but this is just making it a little bit more clear. And then, yes, as far as the post-certification, when they come in, they have to come in with a provisional post-certification at a minimum, that within 6 months, they need to turn that into a standard peace officer certification within the state. So they come in on a provisional basis, potentially, if they're from outside the state, and then they convert within that 6-month period, which is a requirement of the state post board.
Okay, excellent. That's all. I have anything else from anyone else on this section? Okay, seeing none, we will move ahead.
All right, section 2. So probationary appointments. This talks about, we've had issues where we have somebody that promotes, And for any number of reasons, they end up on some kind of light duty, restricted duty. It could be injury, it could be FMLA, it could be, lots of reasons why that happens. But they don't then, as a result of that, we don't have a full probationary period to evaluate the performance of that person in that promoted rank. So this just says, okay, if you're in one of those restricted duty positions for more than 4 weeks, that then your probation is going to start extending by the equivalent amount of time, just to make sure that we have done our due diligence as an agency to make sure that they're adequately performing in that new supervisory role. Yeah, that's really, that's the big piece of that one. Is there any questions on that?
I do not have any, and I'm seeing head shakes no from everyone else, so we're good to move on.
All right. And then when you move down to 6, promotion, so this is where it allows the chief to bypass a candidate and consider the next candidate on a eligibility list. As you know, some of the promotional lists, we don't have a whole lot of control over always, and there may be persons on those lists that may not be a good fit for that promoted position. So this allows the chief to bypass a person on the list and consider the next person for that position. So I will be happy to answer any questions with regard to that.
So I guess my question, I understand where y'all are coming from, but I just wonder if there's any type of criteria at all. So it's not just full discretion, the chief just decides they're going to bypass that person, and then it has to be a civil service process to go back and appeal that. I appreciate having the civil service appeal there, but I just wonder if there's any criteria at all related to performance or something along those lines that we should be including there. Because it reads like there was another section I think that said for a reason, or reasons, I think around discipline maybe, or was that in this one? I'm just concerned. I don't want us to not be having some kind of guardrails there where folks are going to say, well, this is just favoritism.
Yeah, so it doesn't specifically state, a list of reasons why. It is at the discretion of the chief, the way this is worded. There's any number of reasons this could come up. It could be performance without question. It could be potential discipline. It could be, some of our folks have gotten promoted that, have had, criminal charges in the past and things that, I think from a community optics standpoint, they don't play very well for us. And I think that's a big piece of this is to avoid some of those landmines. And yes, it does give the appeal through civil service. But really, this is something that is considered a best practice, or other agencies that do this. But we did not go into so much detail as to give a list of reasons. So, I don't know if there's discomfort with that, or if you want any kind of clarity.
No, I'm sorry. I just reread it. I was mistaken. I remembered it being earlier in the text. It does say for a specific reason. And so that's all I wanted, was something in there where you have to specify. You can't just say, we're just skipping that person. I want to make sure that we're specifying the why, and then if that person wants to appeal that to civil service, they can. But yeah, for some reason, I thought it was earlier in the text. So when I went to look at it, I didn't see it there, but it's there. So
that's fair. And the chief definitely has to give a reason, right? So that there's not just something that's arbitrary. Yep.
Okay. Any questions from anyone else?
Yep. Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, ma'am. So Chief Jewel, how does this square with the consent decrees monitor recommendations around the Civil Service Commission and, obviously our promotion processes? Can you elaborate on that a little?
don't have an explanation for that off the top of my head, unfortunately, sir. I don't know what those recommendations are with regard to, I'm just not familiar enough with them to compare that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Would it be possible to check in with the consent decree monitor just to make sure that this wouldn't maybe take us off track with some of our goals, basically?
Yes, yes, and the monitor has reviewed this and they are okay with that. Mr. Schlanger has, so that level of review has happened. I just don't know how it compares with what those recommendations were with regard to their recommendations to civil service.
All right,
So,
what you just said was a more succinct way to really get at what I was looking for, so.
great. I'm glad I was able to figure that one out. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right.
Okay, can we make sure that does get conveyed to the Citizens Committee when they're reviewing this, that it has gone through the consent decree monitor just for a basic review?
Absolutely. I'll be there tonight and I'll make sure that I make a point to state that.
Okay, excellent. And then I have a question that is maybe more of a city attorney question about the way that this is written. It takes political or religious opinions, affiliations, race, creed, color, or gender, and just says, without reference to any legally protected characteristics pursuant to applicable federal, state, or local law. And my question is, those change. And so having the charter be flexible is maybe a good thing. But for example, um, you know, it's not currently listed in the charter, but would we want to simply change this list? And the example, the concern that I'm thinking about is that, frankly, at this time, there has been legislation at the federal level to actually prohibit transgender individuals from participating in certain activities. And so that seems to me a change in their protected status at that federal level. So are we opening ourselves up if we don't have our own list of the classes that we want to protect? So we say all of these, and then we maybe say, and any legally protected status versus not specifying, and then ending up in a situation where these types of rights are being changed at the state or federal level, and then we as a city are just following along by default, and therefore no longer having protection for those particular classes.
So Councilmember Coombs, I think you've put a finer point on how this plays out. Unfortunately, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. If we have a stagnant list and something changes in federal, state, or local law, that stagnant list really becomes obsolete because we have to follow the federal, state, and local laws. Even if your example, if there was less protection offered on the federal level, well, the state or local law would control. So it would be the most permissive or the most restrictive would always trump the other. In your example, if federal law said that a certain category was no longer protected, if it would become an issue of the interpretation of state or local law, whether or not that additional protection could be afforded, and that would control. Wording it in this way avoids having something left out. And in reality, we would have to follow whatever was left out anyway, because whatever the status is of federal, state, or local, and again, it's not and, it's or, in red in between each one of those categories that controls. I can't hear you.
Thank you. So if we leave it as is, which I'm generally okay with, then if we as a city find ourselves in a situation where we're not in agreement with the federal protected categories, we could make a policy as a council, not in the charter, kind of specifying those protections for our employees, and then that local law could cover them under the charter. Would that be accurate?
That would be, yes, that would be accurate. This is the minimum protection. You can always, there can be additions to that minimum level of protection.
Okay, excellent. I really appreciate that clarification. I wanted to make sure we had dug into that. And I think that's all I have on this section and on that question. So are there any other questions from other members on this section? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next section.
Great. All right. Number 10, lateral entry. So this allows for laterals to be eligible for promotion by taking into account their prior service. So it's still 5 years, which is what it currently is now. You have to be a police officer for 5 years before you're eligible to promote to sergeant. What this does is allows them to take into account 3 years of service from a prior agency, and then a minimum of at least 2 years as an Aurora police officer, and this one actually includes or firefighter, to be eligible for that promotion. So that is the reason for that change, is it just gives laterals a little bit of an ability to promote sooner.
Yep, I do not have any questions about that. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next section.
I have one more small thing on this one.
Or, yes,
That was stricken. So it's just provided, so there was a ratio in charter that said no more than half the persons hired at any given time should come from lateral entry. That's just been stricken just for the competitive nature of the job market.
yep, absolutely. And I think that it makes sense not to have an artificial cap on who we hire and from where, as long as they meet all of the standards that we want folks to meet in terms of qualifications and conduct. So any questions or comments on that item?
Just to follow up to your comment, Councilmember Coombs, I agree with what you said. I'm curious to know, why was that put into there to begin with?
Well, yeah, that predates me, so I don't know. I assume it was just to say that we're going to be, I don't know if there was a concern about the influence of outside agencies. I have no idea where that came from, but maybe, and we were a much, much smaller agency back when that was put into place. And I think that maybe there was a bigger concern there, and that we were going to, have outsiders take over a small agency or something. That's my best guess, but I really don't know the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if it's to do with like culture and culture change and not wanting, that to be forced by folks coming in. But I don't know. I think at this time, it doesn't make sense to have it there. So.
Yeah, agreed. All right, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's what I've got for you. And then there's just the question on the next down at section 3. Just that is the question for council if they would agree to these changes. So that is all of the pieces that I have to share with you, unless you have any other questions that have come up.
So I have another general question, probably for Jack. Can we list all of these as one single question on the ballot? And would there be any advantage, right? Because if we list them as one, then they all fail up or down because of all of them. So would there be any reason to separate them out as individual changes or maybe groups of related changes in order to avoid having something like that happen? Someone has an issue with one, and so they vote down all of them. And then maybe Katie can also follow up on cost of doing it as multiple questions.
I think what you're asking is can you split these out into individual questions? Yes, you can. Whether or not there's a benefit or a detriment to doing so is kind of a policy question for you to decide. These all fit within a generic subject matter that this is all. In fact, I think when we get to the next item, there's an argument to me. The next item being the fire question. Where that fits within this, there's an argument to be made that just be rolled into a question with this that's presented to the voters as one item. But could you split these up into a little bit more bite-sized areas? Yes. I think from a pragmatic standpoint, though, that there at some point you reach a level where people aren't focusing on the details. They just want the bigger picture when they're voting on this. They aren't getting into, yeah, I'm okay, but I just don't like this, half of the number authorized sworn officers. I just don't like that, or something like that, I'll defer. Obviously I'm going to defer to the group and then ultimately council to decide how to present this to the voters.
For sure. I appreciate that information. I agree. Sometimes too many questions is not necessarily a good thing. On the other hand, we don't necessarily want to have all of them fail because someone may have an issue with one. And Katie does have her hand up, so I'm going to let her answer on the cost issue, and then we'll come back to other members.
So the only thing that I would say in regards to the cost would be, I know for Adams and Douglas County, they do charge extra for multiple page ballots. So for Douglas County, the content length is if it exceeds, again, 5 inches in length, and it's an additional charge of $3,000 per inch over 5 inches. And then Adams County can charge for multiple page ballot that results in additional cost. And the actual cost may include charges for extraordinary ballot question length if it increases their printing costs.
Okay, excellent. So Councilmember Lawson, it looked like you had your hand up.
Yes, I just have a question to Katie and then Jack. So I understand maybe not, definitely don't think these should all be together for sure. Maybe there's some similarities on some of these questions that we can make them separate. But I guess whatever the case is going to be, the blue book or the book is to explain these, because some of these aren't, I mean, I'm sitting here because I'm not, I'm learning about this, but some of this may not be so intuitive to a voter. So I do want to make sure that the blue book or whatever to kind of explain these, most people don't look at it and some do. I know I do. Just to explain what each of these are about or how we're going to group them, I think is going to be important. So, and how actually the question is phrased too, is going to be really, really important. Because if someone reads some of this the way it was kind of explained, and Chief Jewel, you did an excellent job. I'm just saying, it's just not layman. I mean, you got to people might not say, oh, 5% of a ratio, or how we're going to put these questions. So I guess I'm just really kind of my question, or maybe not a concern, or just how we're going to put them on the ballot. And I think that's going to be how we're going to phrase the question and also how we're going to explain it in a blue book.
Well, section 4 basically presents the question.
Okay. Okay.
That's the draft.
Okay, I guess I guess you're right, maybe. I'm just a different person that maybe looks at things a little differently, but okay, thank you for that analysis, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my concern, is that language in section 4, right? Clarifying the status of deputy chiefs and commanders, authorizing an increase in number, and clarifying probationary, disciplinary, and promotional procedures. Like, that's a lot. I would think maybe the deputy chiefs and division chiefs should be one. And then maybe either together we have probationary, disciplinary, and promotional, or maybe we have some breaking out of those as well. But I think bare minimum, it should be 2 questions. One that's focused on that chiefs and deputy chiefs section, and one that's focused on the rest, but even having all the rest put together, I question a little bit. Maybe we say promotional and disciplinary and probationary are separated, or something along those lines. But I do feel pretty strongly that one question is not quite enough for all of this. Councilmember Marcano, or sorry, Jack, Katie, or Chief Jewel, did you all have anything you wanted to weigh in on that part before we move on to Councilmember Marcano's question?
Not on that, but if you would indulge me, I need to go back and point out something that Chief Jewel kind of glossed over, and I'm not sure if he saw in the draft. It was left as a question. We're way back in section 1, paragraph 3. There are no changes made in this document. There was a proposal to eliminate the civil service examination portion of that language, and we put a comment that the police representative should be able to explain exactly what the ask was for that provision, and then we could help make that change.
Okay, let's come back to that. Let's cover this part of the question first, even though that may kind of we may have to find somewhere to put that in, and it sounds like that would be one that if it's being asked for might have to be its own question. I think that's pretty significant and potentially contentious. But anything else on Councilmember Lawson's kind of question, point, the general idea about breaking these questions out and explaining them a little more?
If I may?
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
I think it would be our preference. I think it makes sense to group them in similarities. I would really hate to see it, fail because somebody just you agree with, these 4, but, not this one. But because I don't agree with that one so strongly, I'm going to vote the whole thing down. So I think it makes sense to group them by similarities. I think we got to identify what some of those might be. And so it's just a handful of questions versus, a litany of questions. So I think we'd support that. And that would be our position.
Okay, excellent. Councilmember Marcano, did you have any more comments, questions about this piece, the questions, how they'll be listed?
No, actually, that was going to be my suggestion, was to see if we could fit that into 3 different questions, as I think that's more or less like the 5 or 6 different items that we discussed here, more or less how they would fall together. So, yeah, so I was happy to hear that.
Okay, excellent. And then I do now want to go back to the question from Jack, which it sounds like the proposal, and I do vaguely recall this from the general document that I had received before it was the language revisions were all laid out, that there was something with respect to the civil service examination. So PD, so Chris, I guess, what would be the question, or what would be the desire from the department, if you know, on the civil service examination portion of, you said section 3, right, Jack?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, in section 3, it's going through this here. So Jack, could you restate the question for me? So is it basically that the conversation was to eliminate the civil service examination?
So in the note version that everyone was working from, it struck out examination and certification, and then added requirements in collaboration with the applicable department, and that didn't make sense to us. Exactly what the what was the ask, what was the driving force of this. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and see if this is what the thought was, and let you take it from there. Is this would apply in an increase of the various grades could apply either from the very bottom all the way up almost to chief, to add some other position. I would think that maybe examination and certification from the civil service wouldn't be the correct criteria. Perhaps it could be, would only be filed pursuant to the applicable process or the applicable civil service process. Is that what you were looking for? I mean, that's why we didn't include it in the draft.
Yeah, so I can't explain this sufficiently, so I texted Pete, who I know is down the hall. I'm gonna wait for him to get here and maybe give a better response to you. I apologize. I'm not in a position to give an intelligent answer to that. If you give me just 30 seconds.
We definitely can give you a moment
It
to.
wasn't even 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just knocked on the door. Sorry, it's Pete. Sorry, I'm sitting at Chris's desk now. I don't have my, obviously you can't see me, so.
No, we can't.
He said there was a question, so I hate to have anybody repeat themselves, but,
So, yeah, so Jack was asking about, there was a striking of civil service examination and what else? Sorry, Jack, if you want to.
Striking civil service examination and certification requirements for additional positions created by a vote of 7. And that doesn't seem like that would apply if they were on the lower scale or the junior scale. It may apply on the senior scale. I don't know what the rationale was for that, and I think that's why we kicked it back and put a note to in the note version of this for APD to be able to try to explain that to the committee.
okay, let me pull up the changes, because I had reviewed this back when APD had put it together, so let me pull it up real quick, just see the comments you're talking about, Jack. Do you know what section that was, Jack?
Yes, it's section 2, it's subparagraph 2 or 3.
Subparagraph 3. Under the lateral entry?
No. It's creating positions by 7 or more.
Okay.
It's not in our packet, it's in the other document that was being worked from.
Gotcha, the one with the comments.
Mm-hmm.
3-14, paragraph 3.
Paragraph 3. So I think the only discussion that we had was because civil service have changed their rules and regulations where they are certifying the list in cooperation with HR and the departments. So basically, the rule changes that was just put in place by civil service at the last meeting was that after there was a civil service examination, after a oral board interview that involves civil service and representatives of the department, and probably the physical fitness test, then the list would be certified. So I think what PD was trying to accomplish in the charter changes to make sure that just because somebody took the written examination, that wasn't the sole factor for the Civil Service Commission to certify the list.
All right, I don't think you're answering the right question, Pete.
I can't find it.
Maybe
I'm in
this
Chris's
needs a
office, so-
revisit because
I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Yep.
I would suggest that perhaps we not take up adding something that wasn't in this packet, only because not long after this meeting, the Citizens Committee is going to be meeting to discuss, and they will not have been able to review that. So I understand that perhaps that was something that we wanted to work into this set of changes, but if it's okay with everyone, I would recommend postponing that one, since we don't have the backup for ourselves or the Citizens Committee to properly comment and review. Okay, seeing no objection, we will go ahead and leave that out. We'll focus on just what's here. I think my recommendation. So I'll make a motion, and we can see if this is, or not a motion, a suggested recommendation for the way that these questions get broken out. And this can be reviewed and discussed as well by the Citizens Committee. That we break it out as the deputy chiefs and division chiefs, that be one section, that discipline be another question, or maybe probation and discipline. It's hard to decide how to break out. So I'm going to say disciplinary, and then probationary and promotional can be their own question. So we'll have clarifying the status of deputy chiefs and commanders and authorizing the increase in numbers as one section. Disciplinary procedures, so clarifying disciplinary procedures, a second question, and then clarifying probationary and promotional procedures as a third question. So it'll go to the ballot rather than as one, as three. Are there any comments or questions on that? Councilmember Lawson is good. Councilmember Marcano, since I'm not hearing from you, I'm assuming you're okay with that.
He stepped away for a moment.
Oh, okay. Well, we will wait for him to come back. To definitely say, but that would be my recommendation, just because I think disciplinary is potentially going to attract quite a bit of focus. And so we don't want the focus on that issue and any concerns folks may have on that issue to detract from addressing those other concerns. So I guess, Chief Jewel, do you have any thoughts or any questions about breaking it out in that way?
Yeah, I think that works. I think the associations seem to be consistent with what I was thinking. And I think it just chunks it in a way that's similar enough and digestible that I like the way that I think that in the blue book that it can be explained as a little package. And I think that's the opportunity really to clarify anything that anybody may have a question on. So I'm comfortable with that. Yes.
Okay, great. And of course, there may be different recommendations from the Citizens Committee, and then we would take those into consideration on how we decide to bring it forward. So that'll be our preliminary suggestion, and we'll go ahead and move that forward, and then just move on with the discussion, and we can ask Councilmember Marcano when he gets back about whether he approves of that. Because I want to make sure I keep us moving. I know everyone has a full schedule of these committee meetings today. So the next item on the agenda is regarding lateral hires for the Aurora Fire Rescue. And it looks like our presenter will be Angela Garcia, Senior Assistant City Attorney. So Angela, I will go ahead and hand this over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I will present this, and AFR is MIA. But this ordinance also affects the lateral entry section, 316 subsection 10. Throughout the first paragraph of this subsection, it refers to police officers and firefighters, or police department and fire department. Does that at least 5 times until you get to the very last sentence where it talks about lateral academy. It only refers to a lateral only police academy. So we want to get that changed, corrected, so that it can say lateral only police academy or fire academy. So in essence, we're just adding 2 words or 3 words to the ordinance so that fire can have a lateral academy if they so choose to do so.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation, and that makes sense to me. Are there any questions or comments from other members on that?
That's perfectly reasonable.
Yep. Sounds like more or less a technical change. And maybe it would make sense to kind of add that into the third question of the APD questions rather than having it as a separate question. I'm not sure. I'm like, no, because that's probationary and promotional. This is
Yeah.
academies. So we'll leave it as its own thing, I think, because it doesn't exactly fit neatly under those categories. Does that sound good to everyone? Just having this standalone? Okay. And I do want to note that from the chat, want it to be reflected that Councilmember Marcano did support the breaking out of the questions that we discussed earlier. And I think, let me go back to the agenda, but I think that's everything that we have for new business. Yep. So miscellaneous items for consideration. I know we did want to try to have one more public hearing, and we have not gotten that scheduled. So I'm wondering if, since we're here, if we could go ahead and do that while we're here, so we can make sure it happens before June. So does anybody have any suggestions? I know we had done one on a Saturday, one on a Tuesday. Are there any particular days? Obviously, this week would not be appropriate because that would not be enough notice. Ideally, if we could do it the week of the 15th, that would give us some time to get the word out to the public, or if we could do it the week of the 22nd. I know that Councilmember Marcano and I will both be at a conference from the 30th through the 4th. So that
Councilmember Lawson's going to be at that one too.
Oh, you are? Oh, yay!
I am
Didn't know you-
attending.
Excellent. That's great news. I think it's going to be very interesting. Okay, so any thoughts on either the week of the 15th or the 22nd?
Just a thing, something I wanted to state. I think I would prefer whatever date we do is maybe not on a Saturday. It seems like when we did it in the evening, it seems like we got more people to come. Saturdays
agree.
are just kind of rough, so I just would ask if we can maybe not do a Saturday. But I think during the week at that time that we did, I think that was a pretty good time. And you know, if we could do it on a weekday. So that's just my proposal for that part of it. So
Okay, and then
Agreement with
Yes.
what Councilmember, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you. I was gonna say, I'm in agreement. I was thinking the same thing. We had pretty decent attendance, all things considered, for our second public hearing. So I would actually just, you know, maybe see how y'all feel about doing it on the 16th at the same time.
on June 16th.
No, May 16th.
Oh, I'm
It
sorry.
would be a
Sorry.
Tuesday. And
I'm
that was
getting ahead
at,
of myself.
we had it at 6:30, was that correct, or 6?
It was 7.
7. Okay.
I mean, we
yeah.
could go a little earlier if you want. I just think that was a pretty good time frame, you know.
Yeah, I think
6:30.
7
Yeah.
give people time to get there, so I'm comfortable with that. From
I'm comfortable.
staff, are there any concerns about the 16th at 7 p.m.? Okay, seeing none, why don't we go ahead and set that then for the 16th at 7 p.m. and we'll start getting that information out, and that will be for the subject of discussing these APD and AFR charter change proposals. Oh, Michael?
Hi, Councilmember Coombs, just wanted to point out on the calendar that does have a Ward 5 town meeting for that evening.
Well, that's not on my calendar, so that's not great. Usually I have a calendar invite on there. Thank you for letting me know. I don't know I do have a meeting that night. So I'm gonna put that on my calendar so it doesn't get messed up. So could we do the 23rd instead? Because I know the Citizens Charter Committee, I have their meeting for the 18th on my calendar already. So we wouldn't want to do it on the 18th for them. We could also maybe look at the 17th.
The 17th wouldn't work for me, but the 23rd would.
I could do the 23rd.
Okay, then let's go ahead and do the 23rd at 7 p.m. And thank you for catching that, Michael. Again, I don't know why that isn't on my calendar, but it is on yours. That's not great. Okay. All right. So I think that's the only miscellaneous item I had. Do we have any other miscellaneous items for consideration?
Nope.
Okay. So then confirming our next meeting, we didn't have a date set, but I think we did want to do it before the study session where we're going to be reviewing all these items and the recommendations from the Citizens Committee. And I believe, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but our goal is to have this on the meeting of June 5th.
Yes, for study session.
Okay. And then I believe that the last meeting of the Charter Review Committee is during that third week, like, or is that the 18th is their last meeting? I think the 18th is their last meeting. So then if we do the public hearing on the 23rd, would we want to just have like a special meeting off our normal schedule sometime later that week?
I think so, because isn't when is that's gonna be their final meeting, but then their report. So
Oh yeah, we've got to give them time to
Yeah.
kind of get that together from that
'cause
meeting.
they're going through a lot of proposals, and I know I've been addressing a lot of the questions from my session of last week, so that I forward them over some. So I just think it's a lot of items, but don't they have to kind of do like a report, and that does take a little time.
So do we want to say maybe the 25th or the 26th? Maybe the 26th, like we can give them that week to prepare the report, and then we meet on the 26th to review it.
I guess so, because, well, we're traveling the next week, and that's Memorial Weekend. Isn't that Memorial?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, alternatively, I guess we could do a virtual meeting on the 30th while we're traveling. Because that day, I think, is mostly a travel day.
That's fine. I don't
know. I'm good with either one, the 26th or the 30th.
I could do the 26th.
Okay, yeah, that'll make it easier than trying to squeeze that in with travel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe same time, 2 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. Any concerns from staff on that time?
Councilmember Coombs, can you say which date and time you set again?
May 26th at 2 p.m. would be our final meeting of this committee ahead of the study session.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So I think that is everything we have then. Yep, seeing no further business. The meeting of the Charter Review Ad Hoc Policy Committee is adjourned. Thank you,
Bye. Have a good
everyone.
afternoon,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
You too. Bye.